The auctioneer's gavel came down with a crack that echoed through the dusty warehouse like a gunshot. Sold to the gentleman in the back for $75. But the gentle giant standing in the shadows had other plans for the blind girl. On the auction block, what happened next would shatter everything the crowd thought they knew about human worth and unleash abilities that would transform not just one life, but thousands. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning fog hung thick over the industrial district of Riverside, California, masking the sun's attempts to pierce through the gray October sky. In a converted warehouse on the outskirts of town, where legitimate businesses feared to venture, a crowd of roughly 40 people had gathered for what the hand-scrawled notices called Thornfield's monthly curiosity auction among the rusted machinery and stacks of forgotten cargo containers. Makeshift bleachers had been erected to accommodate the peculiar mix of circus owners, sideshow operators, and private collectors who frequented these events. The air reeked of motor oil mildew and the kind of desperation that clings to places where human dignity goes to die. 16-year-old Emma Whitfield sat rigidly on a wooden platform at the front of the warehouse, her pale hands gripping the edges of the chair so tightly her knuckles had turned white. She had learned over the past 3 years that absolute stillness was her only defense against a world that had become increasingly hostile since the accident that took her sight. Her other senses, sharpened by necessity, painted a vivid picture of her surroundings that she wished she could unsee. Lot number 17, announced Harold Thornfield, the auction's proprietor, his voice carrying the false cheerfulness of a man who had long ago traded his conscience for profit. At 58, Thornfield had built his reputation on finding and selling what he called special attractions to entertainment venues that operated in the shadows of legitimate show business. "We have something truly exceptional today, ladies and gentlemen." Emma's acute hearing picked up the shuffle of feet as people leaned forward, the creak of the old bleachers protesting under their shifting weight. She could smell the mixture of cologne and cigarette smoke that wafted from the crowd, each scent telling its own story of greed and opportunism. Standing beside the platform, her uncle Robert Whitfield swayed slightly, the bourbon on his breath, so strong it made Emma's stomach turn even from several feet away. He had been her guardian for exactly 6 months, ever since her grandmother's death had left her with no other family. 6 months during which he had systematically sold everything of value from her grandmother's estate, leaving this final transaction as his last opportunity to profit from his unwanted responsibility. "She can't see a lick," Robert slurred to anyone who would listen, gesturing carelessly toward Emma. "Been that way since she was 13. Car accident. But she's got all her other faculties, if you know what I mean. Real quiet, too. Won't cause any trouble." From the back of the warehouse, someone else was observing the proceedings with growing revulsion. Thomas "Tank" Morrison stood 6 feet 7 inches tall and weighed close to 320 pounds. His massive frame earned through years of legitimate strongman competitions before injury had forced him into the circus circuit. At 34, Tank had witnessed enough human cruelty to fill several lifetimes, but something about this particular auction made his jaw clench with barely controlled anger. Tank had arrived at the warehouse following a tip from a friend who worked the California circus circuit. He'd been looking for new equipment for his strength act, not human trafficking disguised as entertainment procurement. The realization of what was actually happening here made his massive hands curl into fists. "The girl is 16 years old, Thornfield continued, consulting a clipboard with theatrical flair. "Completely blind, but otherwise healthy. Perfect for fortune-telling acts, sympathy attractions, or whatever creative purposes you might envision. She comes with no family obligations, no medical issues beyond the blindness, and—" he paused for effect. "She has some rather interesting abilities that the right owner could develop." Emma's head tilted almost imperceptibly at this last comment. She had been careful to hide her emerging sensitivities from her uncle, knowing instinctively that he would find a way to exploit them. But Thornfield had apparently noticed something during the inspection process that morning, a degrading experience that still made her skin crawl. "What kind of abilities?" called out a woman from the third row. Tank recognized her as Madame Zelenska, who ran a traveling oddity show known for its cruel treatment of performers. Thornfield's smile widened. "Let's just say she has an uncanny way of knowing things she shouldn't be able to know." During intake, she correctly identified every person who entered the room and what they were carrying, despite being unable to see. She also seems to have an unusual effect on animals. They become remarkably calm in her presence. Tank's interest sharpened. He had grown up on a ranch in Montana where his mother, a veterinarian, had taught him to recognize the rare individuals who possessed genuine connections with animals. If this girl had such abilities and was being sold like livestock... Shall we start the bidding at $50? Thornfield announced. 50. Came an immediate response from a thin man in an expensive suit who Tank knew operated several exploitation shows along the West Coast. 60. Madame Zelenska countered. Emma's breathing quickened as the voices called out numbers that reduced her existence to dollar amounts. Her enhanced hearing picked up details that painted a terrifying picture of her potential buyers. The wheeze in one bidder's lungs that spoke of cruelty mixed with sickness. The nervous tap of fingers that revealed another's addiction to stimulants. The predatory breathing pattern of someone whose interests went beyond mere entertainment. 70. Shouted a new voice. Tank studied the girl more carefully. Despite her obvious fear, there was something in her posture that spoke of inner strength. The way she held her head suggested she was tracking every sound, every movement in the room with remarkable precision. Her face, though young, carried the kind of composed dignity that reminded him of his late sister Sarah, who had also been different in ways the world didn't understand. 75. The man in the expensive suit again, his tone suggesting he was approaching his limit. Robert stumbled forward, nearly tripping over his own feet. "She's worth more than that," he slurred. "Tell them about the other thing, Thornfield. Tell them what she did with the dogs." Emma's entire body tensed. She had hoped her uncle had been too drunk to notice the incident with the guard dogs that morning. When they'd brought her to the warehouse, the two German shepherds that patrolled the premises had approached aggressively until she'd whispered something that made them sit peacefully at her feet. It had been an instinctive response to their distress. She could hear in their barking that they were scared and confused, not truly aggressive. "Ah, yes," Thornfield said smoothly. "There was an interesting demonstration this morning. Our security dogs, who normally won't let anyone near them except their handler, became completely docile in her presence. She appeared to communicate with them somehow." The bidding intensified. Tank watched as the price climbed past $100, driven by buyers who saw profitable exploitation in Emma's unusual abilities. Each bid felt like another nail in the coffin of her freedom, another step toward a life of being displayed and used for others' gain. 150. Madame Zelenska declared with finality. A hush fell over the crowd. It was a significant sum for these types of transactions, where human beings were valued less than the revenue they might generate. Tank could see the satisfaction on Thornfield's face as he raised his gavel. $150 going once. Emma's hands trembled despite her effort to remain still. She could hear Madame Zelenska's breathing, recognize the pattern of someone who enjoyed causing pain. Her mind raced through the limited options available to a blind teenage girl with no money, no family who cared, and no legal recourse. Going twice. Tank made his decision. His mother had always told him that the measure of a man wasn't in the weight he could lift, but in the burdens he chose to carry for others. He stepped forward from the shadows, his massive frame causing several people to gasp and shrink back. $500, Tank said quietly, his deep voice carrying easily through the warehouse. The room erupted in whispers. $500 was unheard of in these auctions. Thornfield's eyes gleamed with greed as he looked at the giant man who had just quintupled the expected sale price. "Sir, I don't believe we've had the pleasure of cash," Tank interrupted, pulling a roll of bills from his pocket. $500 cash right now, unless someone wants to bid higher. Madame Zelenska turned to glare at him, but something in Tank's expression made her reconsider any objection. The other bidders similarly found reasons to study their shoes or check their phones rather than challenge the mountain of a man who had just claimed ownership of the blind girl. Emma's head turned toward the sound of Tank's voice, her expression a mixture of confusion and terror. She didn't recognize this new bidder, couldn't read his intentions from his controlled breathing and measured movements. Was he better or worse than the others? The calm authority in his voice suggested power, but power in her experience always meant pain. "Sold," Thornfield declared hastily, bringing down his gavel before Tank could change his mind. "To the gentleman. For $500. Robert whooped drunkenly, already calculating how many bottles he could buy with his windfall. He didn't spare a glance for his niece's Tank, approached the platform to complete the transaction. As Tank counted out the bills, he spoke quietly to Thornfield. "The girl comes with me now. All her belongings, any documentation, everything." Of course, Thornfield agreed, eager to please someone who had just made him a substantial profit. "Though I should mention, she doesn't have much. Just a small bag of clothes and some personal items." Tank nodded and turned to Emma, who sat frozen on the platform like a deer sensing a predator. He could see the micro-expressions flickering across her face, fear, defiance, resignation cycling in rapid succession. When he spoke, he made sure his voice was gentle, pitched to carry reassurance rather than threat. "Emma, my name is Thomas Morrison. I'm going to help you down from there now, okay?" She nodded minutely, but when he extended his hand, he noticed she didn't reach for it. Of course, she couldn't see it. Instead, he carefully touched her elbow, allowing her to use his arm for support as she stood. The platform was higher than she'd expected, and she stumbled slightly. Tank steadied her with surprising gentleness for someone his size. "I've got you," he said simply. "There are 3 steps down. I'll count them out for you." As they descended, Emma's hypersensitive hearing picked up something unexpected in his voice, genuine concern. It was an emotion she hadn't encountered from an adult in so long that she almost didn't recognize it. But there was something else too, a sadness that seemed to run deep, like he understood loss in ways that matched her own. The crowd parted as Tank led Emma through the warehouse, their progress tracked by dozens of eyes filled with curiosity, envy, and speculation. Emma could feel their gazes like physical touches, each one wondering what the giant man intended to do with his expensive purchase. They were almost to the exit when Robert's slurred voice cut through the murmurs. "Hey, I should get her things. That bag has some valuable stuff in it." Tank stopped, his large frame tensing. When he turned back, several people instinctively stepped away from the controlled fury in his expression. "The girl's belongings come with her," he said, each word precise and carrying unmistakable warning. "All of them. Now." Robert seemed to shrink under Tank's gaze. He shuffled off to retrieve a pathetically small canvas bag, which he tossed carelessly in Tank's direction. Tank caught it one-handed and checked the contents. A few changes of clothes, a hairbrush, a small music box, and a photograph in a cracked frame. "This is everything?" Tank asked. "That's all she came with," Robert confirmed, already backing away. "Deal's done. She's your problem now." As they stepped out into the October morning, Emma felt the cool air hit her face and heard the sounds of the city beyond the warehouse district, Freedom of a sort, though she knew she had simply traded one form of captivity for another. The question that terrified her most was what kind of performance this mountain of a man would demand from her. "You must be cold," Tank observed, noticing her thin sweater. He draped his own jacket around her shoulders, the garment so large it reached nearly to her knees. "My truck is just over here. Are you okay to walk?" Emma nodded, confusion adding to her swirling emotions. Why was he being kind? What did he want? In her experience, kindness from strangers always came with a price, usually one too terrible to pay. As Tank guided her carefully across the uneven ground of the warehouse district, neither of them could have imagined how this moment would reshape both their lives. The gentle giant had made a promise in his heart the moment he'd placed that bid. This girl would never be forced to perform for anyone's entertainment. What he didn't yet understand was that in saving her, he was about to discover abilities that would challenge everything he thought he knew about human potential and the connections that bind all living things. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The interior of Tank's truck smelled like leather and pine air freshener, a stark contrast to the musty desperation of the warehouse. Emma sat rigidly in the passenger seat, her hands clutched around the small canvas bag that contained the remnants of her former life. The jacket Tank had given her was warm, carrying the scent of sawdust and something else, a clean, honest smell that reminded her of her grandfather's workshop from years ago. Before everything had fallen apart, Tank drove in silence for the first few minutes, navigating the maze of industrial streets with practiced ease. He could sense Emma's fear radiating from her like heat from a fever, and he searched for the right words to ease her terror. His massive hands gripped the steering wheel gently, the same hands that could bend steel bars, now careful not to make any sudden movements that might frighten the traumatized girl beside him. "I know you're scared," he finally said, his deep voice soft in the confined space of the cab. "And you have every right to be. What happened back there? It wasn't right. No one should ever be sold like that." Emma's head tilted slightly, her way of showing she was listening. Her enhanced hearing picked up the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, the calm pattern of his breathing. There was no acceleration that would indicate deception, no shallow breaths that suggested hidden excitement or anticipation. It confused her more than if he had exhibited the predatory patterns she'd learned to recognize. "My name is Tank," he continued, then corrected himself. "Well, that's what everyone calls me. My real name is Thomas Morrison. I work with the Morrison family circus. It's nothing like what you might be thinking. We're a small operation, family-run. My parents started it 40 years ago." The mention of a circus made Emma's stomach clench. She'd heard enough stories from her grandmother about the traveling shows of the old days where people with differences were displayed like zoo animals. Her fingers unconsciously traced the edge of her music box through the canvas bag. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It was the first time she'd spoken since the auction, and Tank was struck by the musical quality of her tone, even colored as it was by fear. "First, we're going to get you some breakfast," Tank replied. "There's a diner about 10 minutes from here. After that ... He paused, choosing his words carefully. "After that, we need to talk about what happens next. But I want you to know right now you're safe. No one is going to hurt you or force you to do anything you don't want to do." Emma processed this information, her other senses working overtime to detect any hint of deception. The truck's movement was smooth, confident, suggesting someone who was comfortable with their direction. She could hear other vehicles passing, the normal sounds of a city waking up. They weren't heading to some isolated location where screams wouldn't be heard. "Why?" she asked suddenly. "Why did you buy me?" Tank was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, there was a weight to his words that suggested painful memories. My sister Sarah was born deaf. She was the smartest, most capable person I ever knew, but the world couldn't see past what she couldn't do to appreciate what she could. When she was 15, some relatives tried to have her institutionalized, said she was a burden on the family. He paused at a red light, the engine's idle rumble filling the silence. My parents fought them in court, won, and Sarah went on to become a teacher. She taught sign language and worked with kids who were struggling to find their place in a hearing world. She died 5 years ago, cancer, but she lived her life on her own terms. Emma felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of the tight bands of fear that had constrained her, breathing since her uncle had first mentioned the auction a week ago. I'm sorry about your sister. She would have hated what happened in that warehouse, Tank said, the light turning green as he pressed gently on the accelerator. She would have been the first one to stand up and tell everyone exactly what she thought of them. That's partly why I bid. I could hear her voice in my head, telling me to do something. They pulled into the parking lot of Rosie's Diner, a classic American establishment with neon signs and the sound of clattering dishes audible even from outside. Tank parked and turned off the engine, but made no move to get out immediately. Emma, I need to be completely honest with you, he said. I don't have a plan. I saw what was happening, and I acted on instinct. But I promise you this, we'll figure it out together. You have choices now, real choices. But first, when's the last time you ate? Emma tried to remember. Her uncle had been too drunk to prepare meals regularly, and she'd been surviving on whatever she could manage to prepare by touch and memory. Yesterday morning, I think, maybe the day before. She heard Tank's sharp intake of breath, felt the truck shift slightly as his large frame tensed with anger, not at her, her senses. Told her, but at the situation. Right. Breakfast first, then we talk. Can you handle walking into a public place? We can get takeout if you prefer. I can walk, Emma said, a hint of steel entering her voice. She had learned to navigate hostile environments by necessity. A diner full of strangers was far less threatening than the warehouse had been. Tank came around to her side of the truck, opening the door and offering his arm. The step down is pretty high. I'll guide you. As they entered Rosie's Diner, the assault of sounds and smells nearly overwhelmed Emma's heightened senses. Bacon sizzling, coffee percolating, the chatter of morning customers mixing with the clink of silverware and the old jukebox playing Sam Cooke in the corner. She instinctively moved closer to Tank, using his massive presence as a shield against the sensory overload. Tank Morrison. A woman's voice called out warmly. Haven't seen you in weeks. And who's this? Emma felt them being guided to what her spatial awareness told her was a corner booth, more private than the counter seats. The vinyl squeaked as they sat down, and she heard the approach of footsteps, light, efficient, belonging to someone who'd been waiting tables for years. This is Emma, Tank said simply. Emma, this is Rosie. She owns this place and makes the best pancakes in California. None of that charming talk, Thomas Morrison, Rosie said, but Emma could hear the smile in her voice. What can I get you? 2. Tank ordered for both of them after quietly asking Emma's preferences. Pancakes, eggs, bacon, toast, orange juice, and milk. It was more food than she'd seen in a week, and her stomach rumbled audibly at the thought as they waited for their order. Emma became aware of the other patrons' attention. Whispered conversations reached her enhanced hearing. Isn't that the strong man from Morrison's Circus? Who's the girl? Look how young she is. Those clouded eyes. She's blind, poor thing. Ignore them, Tank said quietly. Small town. Everyone's curious about everyone else's business. I'm used to it, Emma replied, and there was a resignation in her voice that made Tank's heart ache. How many times had this girl been stared at, whispered about, treated as an object of pity or curiosity rather than a person? Their food arrived, and Emma navigated the meal with careful precision, her movements economical and practiced. Tank. watched, impressed by her independence despite the challenges. He also noticed how she paused occasionally, her head tilting as if listening to something beyond the normal diner noise. "You can hear more than most people, can't you?" he asked gently, Emma's fork stilled. "How did you know?" "My mother worked with animals her whole life. She always said that when one sense is taken away, the others compensate, sometimes in extraordinary ways. Plus, I saw how you reacted in the warehouse, tracking everyone's movement without seeing them." Emma debated how much to reveal, but something about Tank's straightforward manner and the genuine interest in his voice made her decide on honesty. "It started after the accident. At first, it was just being able to hear better, but lately—" She paused, unsure how to explain. Experiences that sounded impossible even to her. "Lately?" Tank prompted gently. "I can hear things in people's voices. Not just words, but intentions, I guess, emotions. Sometimes I know things I shouldn't be able to know." She waited for the disbelief, the dismissal she'd encountered whenever she'd tried to explain before. Instead, Tank leaned forward slightly. "Like what happened with the guard dogs at the warehouse." Emma nodded. "They weren't mean. They were scared. I could hear it in their barking, the pitch, the rhythm. They'd been trained with pain, and they were expecting more pain. When I showed them I wasn't a threat, they calmed down." "That's remarkable," Tank said, and Emma could hear the sincerity in his voice. "Have you always been able to communicate with animals?" "Not communicate exactly," Emma clarified, pushing her eggs around her plate. "It's more like understanding. After I lost my sight, I started noticing things. The way a dog's bark changes when it's lonely versus when it's warning. How cats purr differently when they're content versus when they're stressed. Birds have different songs for different emotions." Tank was quiet for a moment, processing this information. "At our circus, we have a variety of animals. Horses, dogs, a few exotic birds. They're all rescues, animals that were abandoned or mistreated. My mother started that tradition, said a circus should be about wonder and joy, not exploitation." "Your circus sounds different," Emma said cautiously. "It is," Tank assured her. "We're more like a family variety show. My parents are retired now, but my brother Jake runs the business side while I handle the physical acts in animal care. My sister-in-law Maria does aerial work, my nephew Billy is learning juggling, and we have about a dozen other performers who've become family over the years." He paused, then continued. "We have a strict rule: no one performs unless they want to. Everyone contributes in their own way, whether that's performing, working behind the scenes, or helping with the animals. It's about community, not exploitation." Emma absorbed this information, her enhanced senses analyzing every word for deception and finding none. "But you bought me at an auction." Tank's voice carried deep regret. "I know how that looks, how it is. And I'm sorry you had to go through that. The plan was to get you out of there, away from those people who would have used you. But now—" He took a deep breath. "Now you have choices. I can help you contact social services, find you a proper placement. I can help you get back on your feet independently if that's what you want. Or double quotes or," Emma prompted when he paused. "Or you could come stay at the circus for a while. Not as a performer," he added quickly, "just as our guest. You'd have your own trailer, privacy, regular meals. Maybe you could help with the animals if you wanted. They respond better to kindness than to training. And it sounds like you understand them in ways most people don't, but only if you want to. No pressure, no obligations." Emma sat in silence, her mind racing through the options. Social services meant foster care, and at 16, her chances of finding a good placement were slim. Independence was impossible without resources or job skills. But a circus, even a kind one, meant trusting strangers with her safety. "Why would you do this?" she asked. "You don't know me." "You spent $500 on a stranger." Tank's answer came without hesitation. Because everyone deserves a chance to discover what they're capable of. Because my sister taught me that different doesn't mean less valuable. And because ... He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. Because I've been where you are. Not exactly, but close enough. Feeling like the world has no place for you, like you're only valued for what others can take from you. Emma's enhanced hearing caught the pain underlying his words, the echo of experiences that had shaped him into someone who would spend his last $500 to save a stranger. You were hurt too, she said, not a question but a statement. Of understanding, different kind of hurt, Tank admitted. But yeah, the circus saved me, gave me a family when I had none. Maybe it could do the same for you. Or maybe not, that's for you to decide. The diner had filled up around them, the breakfast rush in full swing. Emma listened to the normalcy of it all, orders being called out, newspapers rustling, coffee cups clinking. For the first time in months, she was sitting in a public place without fear of what would happen next. I'd like to see the circus, she said finally. Not to perform, just to ... see. Is that okay? Tank's relief was audible in his voice. More than okay. We'll go there now if you're ready. You can meet everyone, see the place, and then decide what you want to do. No rush, no pressure. As they prepared to leave, Rosie approached their table one more time. Everything okay here? She asked, and Emma could hear the protective concern in her voice. Everything's good, Rosie, Tank assured her. Best breakfast in California, as always. You take care of this young lady, Rosie said, and there was steel beneath the warmth. She looks like she's been through enough. Yes, ma'am, Tank replied solemnly. That's the plan. As they walked back to the truck, Emma felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the faint stirring of hope. It was fragile, barely more than a whisper, but it was there. The gentle giant beside her had made no demands, claimed no ownership despite the money he'd paid. Instead, he'd offered her something she'd thought lost forever, the power to choose her own path. The morning sun had burned through the fog, warming her face as Tank helped her into the truck. Whatever came next, she was no longer alone. And for now, that was enough. The Morrison family circus occupied a 10-acre plot on the outskirts of Riverside, where the city gradually gave way to orange groves and open fields. As Tank's truck rumbled through the main gate, Emma's enhanced hearing began painting a picture of her new surroundings. Unlike the industrial warehouse district, this place thrummed with life, not the desperate kind she'd grown accustomed to, but something warmer, more genuine. Welcome to our little corner of chaos, Tank said as he parked near a cluster of well-maintained trailers. It's not much compared to the big operations, but it's home. Emma could hear horses nickering in the distance, the rhythmic thump of someone practicing on a trampoline, and the laughter of children playing. But what struck her most was the absence of the tension she'd learned to associate with performance venues. There were no cracks of whips, no sharp commands, no sounds of distress from confined animals. Uncle Tank, a young voice called out, followed by rapid footsteps approaching the truck. You're back. Mom said you went to look at equipment, but... Oh. The footsteps stopped abruptly, and Emma sensed the child's sudden uncertainty. She could picture him, probably 8 or 9 years old, based on his voice, staring at her with the unfiltered curiosity of youth. Billy, this is Emma, Tank said, getting out of the truck and coming around to help her down. Emma, this is my nephew Billy. He's our apprentice juggler and chief mischief maker. Hi, Billy said, his voice carrying a mix of shyness and interest. Are you really blind? Can you not see anything at all? Billy, another voice admonished, female, early 30s, with the kind of authority that came from motherhood. That's not polite. It's okay, Emma said softly, addressing the space where she'd located Billy's voice. Yes, I'm really blind. I can't see anything, but I can hear really well. Like right now, I can hear that you're bouncing on your toes. Because you're excited, and you have something in your pocket that's jingling. Probably marbles or small balls for juggling. Billy gasped. She's right. I have my practice balls. That's amazing. Can you hear other stuff too? Lots of things, Emma admitted, finding herself oddly comforted by the child's straightforward curiosity. The woman approached, her gait suggesting natural grace, possibly a dancer or aerialist. I'm Maria Morrison, Tank's sister-in-law. Welcome to our circus, Emma. Tank called ahead and mentioned we might have a guest. Emma noticed the careful way Maria phrased it. Guest, not new performer or acquisition. The distinction mattered more than she could express. Why don't I show you around? Maria offered. Tank, Jake's looking for you. Something about the permits for next month's show in San Bernardino. Tank hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave Emma. She could sense his protective hovering and found it both touching and slightly suffocating. I'll be fine, Emma assured him. Thank you for breakfast and for everything else. Tank's large hand briefly touched her shoulder, the gesture awkward but sincere. I'll find you later. Maria will take good care of you. As his heavy footsteps retreated, Maria stepped closer. Her voice carried a different quality now, woman to woman, understanding mixed with caution. He's a good man, Maria said simply. Saved more than a few of us over the years. But I imagine you're wondering what you've gotten yourself into. Emma nodded, appreciating the directness. He said this place is different, that no one's forced to perform. That's true, Maria confirmed, gently taking Emma's arm to guide her. But let me show you rather than just tell you. Billy, run ahead and let everyone know we have a visitor. As they walked, Maria provided a verbal map of the circus grounds. Main performance tent to your left. We only use it for actual shows, not daily practice. Straight ahead are the animal enclosures, though enclosure is too strong a word, more like spacious habitats. To your right are the practice areas and living quarters. Emma's enhanced hearing was cataloging every sound, building a three-dimensional map in her mind. She could hear horses moving freely in a large paddock, their contented snorts indicating good health and treatment. Somewhere, a violinist was practicing, not circus music, but something classical and complex. That's Douglas, Maria explained, noting Emma's tilted head. Former symphony musician. Lost his position when he developed tremors in his left hand. Here, he teaches music to local kids and plays for our shows when he feels steady enough. Number. Pressure to perform when he doesn't. They paused near what Emma's nose told her was the stable area. The scent of hay and horses was clean, well maintained. No overwhelming ammonia smell of neglected stalls, no sour odor of poor nutrition. Duchess Sterling. Come meet someone, Maria called out. Emma heard two sets of hoofbeats approaching, one heavier and more confident, one lighter and slightly hesitant. The horses stopped at what must have been a fence line, their breathing curious rather than agitated. Hold out your hand palm flat, Maria instructed. Duchess loves to make new friends. Emma extended her hand carefully and felt the velvet softness of a horse's muzzle, followed by warm breath and gentle whiskers exploring her palm. The horse, Duchess, made a soft whickering sound that Emma interpreted as approval. She likes you, Maria said, surprise coloring her voice. Duchess is usually shy with strangers. She was a police horse who got spooked during a riot. Developed trust issues after that. Emma found herself stroking the horse's neck, feeling the powerful muscles relax under her touch. She's not really shy, Emma said quietly. She's careful. There's a difference. She's listening to people's intentions before deciding whether to trust them. And what are your intentions? The new voice made Emma turn. Male, early 40s, carrying the same subtle authority as Maria, but tempered with what sounded like genuine curiosity rather than suspicion. Jake Morrison, the voice continued. Tank's brother, ringmaster, and general keeper of chaos around. Here, you must be Emma. I don't know what my intentions are, Emma answered honestly. This morning I was being auctioned to the highest bidder. Now I'm petting a horse at a circus. I'm still processing. Jake's laugh was warm, understanding. Fair enough. Tank mentioned you have a gift with animals. Seems Duchess agrees. The second horse, Sterling, based on Maria's earlier call, had moved closer, and Emma felt another muzzle nudging her shoulder. She reached up to stroke this one too, noting the different personality in the touch. Where Duchess was cautious but warm, Sterling seemed younger, more playful. Sterling's our newest rescue, Jake explained. Found him half-starved in a foreclosed property. He's been here 3 months, and this is the first time I've seen him approach someone new without coaxing. Emma felt something stirring in her chest. Not quite hope, but possibility. These animals weren't broken or cowed. They were healing, choosing to trust again despite past trauma. Maybe she could do the same. Would you like to meet some of the other residents? Maria asked, both human and animal. They continued the tour, each introduction adding another layer to Emma's understanding of this unusual place. There was Valentina, an elderly acrobat from Russia who now taught flexibility and balance to anyone interested. Her accented voice carried decades of stories and hard-won wisdom. Ah, another one Tank has saved, Valentina said upon meeting Emma. He has habit of collecting broken things and helping them become whole. Saved me from deportation 5 years ago. Now I have green card and family. Marcus, a former Navy veteran who'd lost his leg to an IED, demonstrated his wheelchair acrobatics with infectious enthusiasm. Tank found me doing dangerous stunts on the boardwalk for tourist money. Convinced me I could do the same thing here, but safer and with people who actually gave a damn. There was Chun, a young woman whose burn scars hadn't diminished her skill. With poi and fire dancing. Roberto, whose stutter disappeared completely when he performed magic tricks. Sarah, no relation to Tank's late sister, whose anxiety disorder made traditional employment impossible but who had found her calling training the circus's small collection of rescue dogs. Each person had a story of being discarded by mainstream society, of finding refuge and purpose within this makeshift family. Emma noticed that while many were performers, just as many contributed in other ways, maintaining equipment, handling bookkeeping, cooking communal meals, teaching skills. To local children who visited for lessons. We're not really a circus in the traditional sense, Jake explained as they paused near the communal kitchen area. We're more like a collective. Everyone contributes what they can, takes what they need. The shows we put on help fund everything. But they're not the only point. Emma could smell something wonderful cooking, her enhanced senses, identifying herbs and spices that promised a proper meal rather than the basic sustenance she'd grown accustomed to. That's Mama Rose, Maria said, noting Emma's interest. Not anyone's actual mama, but she mothers everyone anyway. Showed up 2 years ago after her restaurant went under in the recession. Said she was too old to start over in a traditional kitchen, but too stubborn to stop cooking. Is that our new girl? A voice boomed from what must have been the kitchen entrance. Footsteps approached, heavy but quick, suggesting someone comfortable with their size who moved with surprising agility. I'm Emma, she offered, unsure how else to respond to being called our new girl. And I'm Mama Rose, the woman declared, and suddenly Emma found herself enveloped in a hug that smelled of cinnamon and vanilla. Lord child, your skin and bones. When's the last time someone fed you properly? Tank took me to breakfast this morning, Emma managed, overwhelmed by the unexpected maternal affection. Diner food, Mama Rose scoffed. That'll keep you going. But it won't nourish your soul. You come by the kitchen later and I'll fix you something proper. And that's not a request, young lady. Emma found herself nodding, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. When was the last time someone had worried about whether she was eating enough? As the tour continued, Emma's mental map of the circus expanded beyond physical layout to emotional geography. There were clear gathering spots where people naturally congregated: the kitchen area, a fire pit surrounded by mismatched but comfortable chairs, a workshop where repairs and creative projects happen side by side. "This is the practice tent," Maria announced, leading Emma into a space that felt vast based on the echo of their footsteps. "Want to know a secret?" Emma nodded, curious. Every single person here was terrified the first time they entered this tent. Terrified they weren't good enough, that they didn't belong, that someone would figure out they were just pretending to have value. "But you know what?" "What?" Emma asked when Maria paused. Every single person was wrong. Everyone has something to offer. Sometimes it just takes a while to figure out what that is. They were interrupted by a commotion outside. Excited barking mixed with human laughter. Through the tent entrance came a tumble of fur and enthusiasm that resolved into 3 dogs of various sizes, followed by a young woman calling apologies. Sorry, they got away from me when they heard we had a visitor. They're friendly, I promise." But Emma was already kneeling, her hands extended as the dogs swarmed her with tails wagging. Her enhanced hearing had told her everything she needed to know. These were happy dogs, well-treated and socialized. Their barks carried joy, not aggression or fear. "This is amazing," the young woman, Sarah, breathed. "They usually take forever to warm up to new people. Biscuit especially, he's the terrier. He was abused before we got him and typically hides from strangers." But Biscuit was currently trying to climb into Emma's lap, his entire body wiggling with happiness, as she found exactly the right spot behind his ears. "She has a gift," Maria explained to Sarah. "Can understand what they're feeling." "More than that," Sarah said slowly, watching the interaction with professional interest. "She's communicating back somehow. Look at how they're responding to her. Touch. It's like she's speaking their language." Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. She'd never had her ability observed so closely or discussed so openly. "I just listen," she said quietly. "They tell you what they need if you pay attention." "Would you be interested in helping with training sessions?" Sarah asked eagerly. "Not performing or anything, just being there. I have a feeling the dogs could learn a lot from you. And maybe you could teach me how to listen better." Before Emma could respond, a bell rang somewhere on the grounds, not harsh or demanding, but a gentle chime that seemed to be a signal of some kind. "Lunch bell," Maria explained. "Communal meals are optional but recommended. It's how we stay connected as a family." As they made their way toward the kitchen area, Emma felt overwhelmed by everything she'd experienced in just a few hours. This morning she'd been property to be sold. Now people were asking for her help, offering to teach her, treating her like she had value beyond what someone might pay for her. "It's a lot," Maria said quietly, seeming to sense Emma's emotional state. "Tank dumps you into our chaos and expects you to just adapt. But you don't have to decide anything today, or tomorrow, or next week. Take your time." They entered the dining area, a covered outdoor space with long tables and benches. The sound of conversations paused briefly as people noticed Emma, then resumed with what seemed like deliberate normalcy. She appreciated the effort to not make her feel like a spectacle. Tank appeared at her elbow, his presence steadying. "How was the tour?" "Overwhelming," Emma admitted. "But good overwhelming, I think." "That's how everyone feels at first," he assured her. "Come on, let's get some food before Billy eats everything." Growing boy with the appetite of 3 grown men. "I heard that," Billy called from somewhere nearby, his mouth obviously full. As Emma let herself be guided to a seat, surrounded by the comfortable chaos of a family meal, she marveled at the journey that had brought her here. This morning, she'd been certain her life was over, that she would disappear into some horrible situation from which there was no escape. Now, She sat among people who had all been broken in various ways, who had all been discarded by a world that couldn't see their value. But here, in this unlikely place, they had found ways to rebuild themselves and each other. She didn't know if she would stay. Didn't know if this could really become home. But for the first time in years, she was curious about tomorrow instead of dreading it. And that, she thought as Mama Rose placed a plate of something that smelled like heaven in front of her, was a beginning. 2 weeks had passed since Emma's arrival at the Morrison family circus, and the late October nights had grown cold enough to warrant extra blankets in the small but comfortable trailer she'd been given. It was nearly midnight when she woke to sounds that made her enhanced hearing prickle with alarm. One of the horses was in distress. Without thinking, Emma pulled on the jacket Tank had bought her and carefully made her way outside. She'd memorized the path from her trailer to the stables, counting steps and learning landmarks through touch and sound. The circus grounds were quiet except for the increasingly agitated sounds coming from the horse paddock. As she approached, she could hear Jake's voice, tight with worry. "Easy, Phantom. Easy, boy. The vet's on her way." "What's wrong?" Emma asked softly, not wanting to startle anyone. "Emma?" Jake sounded surprised. "You shouldn't be out here. Phantom's having some kind of episode. He's been thrashing for the past hour. We can't get close enough to help." Emma could hear the horse's labored breathing, the panic in his movements. But underneath the obvious distress, her enhanced senses picked up something else, a rhythm to his breathing that suggested pain in a specific location. "Left side," she said suddenly. "Lower abdomen. He's not just panicking, something's causing sharp stabbing pains. Can you hear how his breathing catches every 12 seconds? That's not random." Dr. Patricia Wells, the circus's regular veterinarian, arrived just as Emma was explaining what she heard. The vet was skeptical at first. Emma could hear it in the slight condescension in her voice when Jake explained the teenager's observations. "I appreciate everyone wanting to help," Dr. Wells said carefully, "but I need to examine the horse properly. If you could all step back." Phantom's distress intensified, his hooves striking dangerously close to the fence. Tank appeared, having been roused by the commotion, and Emma felt his protective presence beside her. "Let Emma try," Tank said quietly. "She has a way with animals." "Mr. Morrison, I'm a licensed veterinarian. I can't have an untrained teenager." "Please," Emma interrupted, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "I can hear something you can't. He's not going to let anyone near him while he's this frightened, but I might be able to calm him enough for you to examine him safely." There was a tense moment of silence, broken only by Phantom's continued distress. Finally, Dr. Wells sighed. "Fine, but if she gets hurt, the liability. I'll sign whatever you need," Jake said quickly. "Emma, are you sure?" Emma nodded, then carefully climbed through the fence rails. The moment she entered the paddock, Phantom's behavior shifted. His thrashing slowed, his head turning toward her with what seemed like recognition despite them. Having minimal interaction over the past 2 weeks. "Hey, beautiful," Emma whispered, extending her hand and letting the horse catch her scent. "I know it hurts. I can hear it in your breathing. But you're scaring everyone, and they can't help. If you won't let them." She began humming, not any particular tune, but a low, rhythmic sound that seemed to match some frequency only she and Phantom could perceive. The horse's breathing began to regulate, his pawing at the ground becoming less frantic. "That's impossible," Dr. Wells breathed. "He was completely inconsolable 30 seconds ago." Emma placed her hand on Phantom's neck, feeling the rapid pulse beneath his skin. As she maintained contact, something extraordinary happened. Information flooded through her awareness, not in words or images, but in pure sensation. She could feel the location of his pain as if it were her own body, sense the inflammation that was causing his distress. "It's not colic," she said with absolute certainty. "There's a foreign object in his lower intestine. Something sharp but small. Metal, maybe. It's causing localized inflammation, but hasn't perforated anything yet. Dr. Wells moved closer, her skepticism replaced by professional interest. How could you possibly know that? I just ... Do, Emma said, unable to explain the connection she felt. If you examine here, she guided the vet's hand to a specific spot on Phantom's side, you'll feel the inflammation. And his temperature is elevated by about 2 degrees in that area. The examination that followed confirmed everything Emma had described. X-rays revealed a small piece of metal, likely from a broken fence rail, lodged exactly where Emma had indicated. The surgery to remove it was scheduled for dawn, with excellent prospects for full recovery, because it had been caught early. As they walked back to the main area, Dr. Wells pulled Jake aside, though Emma's hearing caught every word. That girl has abilities I've never seen in 40 years of veterinary practice. What she did tonight, ... It should be studied, documented. This could revolutionize animal medicine. She's not a research subject, Tank said firmly, having overheard the same conversation. She's under our protection. But Emma was processing her own experience, trying to understand what had happened. The connection with Phantom had been deeper than anything she'd felt before. It wasn't just enhanced hearing or careful observation. She had somehow accessed the horse's direct physical experience. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Dr. Wells had apparently made some calls, and 3 representatives from the California Veterinary Medical Association arrived wanting to witness Emma's abilities firsthand. Tank and Jake were prepared to send them away, but Emma surprised them. I want to understand what's happening to me, she told them. If these people can help explain it, maybe that's a good thing. What followed was a series of carefully controlled interactions with various animals at the circus. Under observation, Emma demonstrated abilities that defied conventional understanding. She correctly identified injuries and illnesses in animals she'd never met before, pinpointed emotional trauma in rescue dogs, and even predicted which horses were developing lameness issues before they showed visible symptoms. Dr. Rebecca Chun, a specialist in animal neurology, was particularly intrigued. It's as if she's accessing the animal's nervous systems directly. The accuracy of her diagnostics suggests some kind of bioelectric field interaction we don't yet understand. But it was the afternoon session with Sterling that revealed the true extent of Emma's evolving abilities. The young horse had been making excellent progress in his recovery from starvation, but he still refused to let anyone ride him. Multiple trainers had tried gentle approaches with no success. He associates being ridden with pain, Sarah explained to the observers. His previous owner used harsh bits and spurs. We've been patient, but he needs exercise beyond what he can. Get in the paddock. Emma approached Sterling, her hand extended as always. But this time, when she made contact, the connection felt different, stronger, more reciprocal. She could sense not just his current state, but his memories, stored in his body as patterns of tension and fear. Someone's asking permission, she said softly, and those watching noticed Sterling's ears swivel toward her voice. He wants to know if I understand what happened to him. For several minutes, Emma stood perfectly still, her hand on Sterling's neck. To observers, nothing seemed to be happening. But Maria, watching from nearby, noticed subtle changes. Sterling's posture relaxing, his breathing deepening, his eyes losing the wary edge that had been constant since his arrival. He says he'll try, Emma announced suddenly. Not today, but soon. He needs to trust that stopping means stopping, that no will be respected. He says. Dr. Chun asked carefully. Emma flushed, not in words. It's more like emotional concepts, intentions. I don't know how to explain it better. That evening, the circus community gathered for one of their regular family meetings. The day's events had created a buzz of excitement mixed with concern. Everyone had opinions about what Emma's abilities might mean. We need to be careful, Valentina warned, her years of experience evident in her caution. When word spreads about what she can do, people will come. Not all with good intentions. But think of the animals we could help, Sarah countered. The rehabilitation possibilities alone are staggering. Tank had been unusually quiet throughout the discussion. Finally he spoke. Emma, this is your choice. Your abilities, your decision. What do you want? Emma had been dreading this question all day. The scientists wanted to study her. The animal advocates wanted to use her abilities. For rehabilitation, everyone had plans for what she could do. But what did she want? When I was in that warehouse, she began slowly, being sold like property, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd never have choices again. Then Tank saved me, and all of you accepted me, and suddenly I had too many choices. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Today, when I connected with Sterling, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Purpose. Not the kind someone else assigns to you, but the kind that comes from inside. I want to help animals, but I want to do it here, with all of you. Not in some laboratory or university. This is my home now. The relief in the room was palpable. Jake was the first to speak. Then that's what we'll do. We'll find ways to help animals while keeping you safe and respected. Maybe we can bring animals here for rehabilitation. Make it part of what the circus offers. A healing circus, Marcus said thoughtfully. I like the sound of that. Plans began forming immediately. They would create a program where traumatized or injured animals could be brought to the circus for rehabilitation, with Emma working alongside veterinarians and trainers. The circus performances would continue, but they would also offer educational programs about animal welfare and the human-animal bond. Dr. Chun offered to help establish protocols and documentation methods that would satisfy scientific curiosity. Without treating Emma like an experiment, Dr. Wells volunteered to be the primary veterinary consultant, having witnessed firsthand what Emma could accomplish. But the most touching response came from Billy, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during the adult discussions. Does this mean Emma's staying forever? He asked hopefully. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. If you'll have me, she said softly. The chorus of affirmation that followed left no doubt about the answer. Late that night, Emma sat outside her trailer, listening to the familiar sounds of the circus settling down for sleep. Tank found her there, bringing 2 cups of hot chocolate from Mama Rose's kitchen. Quite a day, he said, settling his large frame onto the steps beside her. The scientists think I'm accessing some kind of quantum field, Emma said with a small laugh. Dr. Chun used words I didn't understand to describe something I do without thinking. Does it matter what they call it? Tank asked gently. Emma considered this. No, I suppose not. But Tank. What if I can't control it? What if it gets stronger? What if you help hundreds of animals who would otherwise suffer in silence? Tank interrupted. What if your gift is exactly what it appears to be? A way to bridge the gap between species and create understanding where there was only fear? They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the autumn air carrying the scent of hay and the distant sound of Sterling moving peacefully in his stall. Thank you, Emma said finally, for seeing something in me worth saving. Tank's response was characteristically simple. I didn't save you, Emma. You saved yourself. I just gave you the chance. As Emma made her way back to her trailer, she reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. The frightened girl who had sat on that auction platform seemed like a different person entirely. That girl had been defined by what she couldn't do, see, contribute, matter. This new version of herself was defined by possibilities. She could heal. She could connect. She could belong. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Word of her abilities would spread beyond the circus. People would come seeking miracles, and others would come seeking to exploit or debunk what she could do. But tonight, She was simply Emma, not a curiosity or a commodity, but a member of a family that had chosen to protect and nurture her gifts. The awakening of her abilities was really the awakening of her true self. And for the first time in her life, she was excited to discover what else might be possible. 6 weeks into Emma's new life at the Morrison family circus, the first real threat arrived disguised as opportunity. It was a foggy November morning when an expensive black sedan pulled through the circus gates, followed by 2 SUVs that screamed government authority to anyone paying attention. Emma was in the rehabilitation tent with Sterling and 2 new arrivals, rescue dogs from a hoarding situation, when her enhanced hearing picked up the approaching vehicles. The engine sounds were wrong, too smooth and coordinated, like a hunting pack moving in formation. "Tank," she called out, knowing he was working nearby. "We have visitors, official ones." By the time the vehicles parked near the main office trailer, Jake and Tank had assembled what Emma had come to think of as their protection formation. Tank's massive presence on one side, Jake's quieter but equally firm authority on the other, with Maria strategically positioned where she could see everything while appearing casual. The woman who emerged from the sedan moved with the calculated grace of someone accustomed to power. Dr. Victoria Ashford stood about 5'8", her silver hair pulled back in a style that suggested efficiency over vanity. Her companions, 2 men and 1 woman, remained by the vehicles, their positioning making it clear they were security rather than colleagues. "Mr. Morrison," Dr. Ashford addressed Jake with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Dr. Victoria Ashford from the Institute for Advanced Biological Studies. We've heard remarkable things about a young woman in your care." Emma, listening from inside the tent, felt her stomach clench. The woman's voice carried undertones that her enhanced senses immediately flagged as dangerous, not physically threatening, but manipulative, calculating. This was someone who saw people as resources to be acquired. "We run a family circus, Dr. Ashford," Jake replied evenly. "Lots of remarkable people here. You'll have to be more specific." Dr. Ashford's smile tightened. "I believe you know exactly who I mean. Emma Whitfield. We have documentation of her exceptional abilities with animals, and we're prepared to offer significant compensation for the opportunity to study ... to work with her." "Emma's not for sale," Tank said bluntly, his massive frame shifting slightly to block the path to the rehabilitation tent. "Of course not," Dr. Ashford responded smoothly. "We're not suggesting anything so crude. We're offering her the opportunity to develop her gifts in a proper research environment. Our facility in Nevada has resources you couldn't imagine, the latest technology, expert staff, connections to universities worldwide." From her hidden position, Emma could hear what others might miss: the slight elevation in Dr. Ashford's heartbeat when she mentioned Nevada, the controlled breathing that suggested she was managing her excitement. Whatever this institute really was, its interest in Emma went beyond scientific curiosity. "Perhaps we should ask Emma what she wants," Maria suggested, her performer's instincts reading the tension perfectly. "By all means," Dr. Ashford agreed readily. Too readily, Emma thought. Tank came to get her, his protective presence reassuring as they walked to meet their visitors. Emma had learned to navigate the circus grounds confidently, but now she let uncertainty show in her movements, making herself appear more vulnerable than she was. Sometimes she'd learned, letting people underestimate you was the best defense. "Miss Whitfield," Dr. Ashford's voice warmed with false maternal concern, "it's wonderful to finally meet you. I've read the reports of your work with traumatized animals. Extraordinary doesn't begin to cover it." Emma tilted her head, focusing her enhanced senses on the woman. Beyond the expensive perfume and pressed clothes, she could detect something else, the scent of fierce sweat, old but ingrained. The kind that came from working in places where fear was a constant companion. "What kind of institute requires armed security to recruit teenagers?" Emma asked quietly. The silence that followed was telling. Emma had correctly identified what the others had only suspected. The two men and woman by the vehicles weren't just drivers or assistants. Dr. Ashford recovered quickly. Perceptive. My security is for the protection of our research subjects. We work with individuals who have unique abilities. Not everyone appreciates the value of such gifts. Some would exploit them for less noble purposes. Like turning them into weapons? Emma asked, the words coming from some instinct she couldn't name. This time, Dr. Ashford's controlled mask slipped slightly. What makes you say that? Emma could hear it now. The woman's history written in her voice patterns, her breathing, the way she held her body. Your former military, intelligence probably. Your institute isn't really about biological studies. It's about finding people like me and figuring out how to use our abilities for what? Defense contracts? Espionage? One of the security team shifted position, hand moving toward what was undoubtedly a concealed weapon. Tank stepped closer to Emma, his message clear. You're remarkably insightful, Dr. Ashford said, dropping the warm pretense. Yes, our work has defense applications. But think of the good you could do, helping locate victims in disaster zones, identifying health threats before they become epidemics, assisting in search and rescue operations. All noble goals, Jake interjected. All things she can do right here, without being locked in a government facility. Dr. Ashford's expression hardened. Mr. Morrison, I don't think you understand the full situation. Emma's abilities have been classified as a matter of national security. We're not making a request. The threat hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire. Emma felt the Circus family tense around her. Valentina appearing silently on the office trailer steps. Marcus rolling his wheelchair into view with deliberate casualness. Even Mama Rose emerging from the kitchen with a cleaver that she just happened to be drying. Actually, a new voice said, I think it's you who doesn't understand the situation. Everyone turned as Sheriff Patricia Coleman walked into view, accompanied by two deputies. The sheriff was a tall black woman in her 50s who had served Riverside County for 3 decades and had no patience for federal overreach. Sheriff Coleman, Dr. Ashford said carefully. This is a federal matter. Is it? Sheriff Coleman asked. Pleasantly. Because I've been on the phone with some interesting people this morning. Turns out your Institute for Advanced Biological Studies isn't registered with any federal agency I can find. Your vehicles have fake government plates. And those weapons your security team are carrying? Not authorized for civilian use in California. Emma's enhanced hearing caught the sudden spike in heart rates from Dr. Ashford's team. The woman herself remained outwardly calm, but her breathing had shifted to combat patterns. There seems to be a misunderstanding, Dr. Ashford began. No misunderstanding, Sheriff Coleman interrupted. You're operating under false pretenses, carrying illegal weapons, and threatening a minor. You have 10 minutes to leave my county. Don't come back. The standoff lasted another tense moment before Dr. Ashford smiled coldly. This isn't over. Emma's abilities are too valuable to remain hidden in a circus. One way or another, she work with us. That sounds like a threat, Tank said quietly, his massive frame coiled with potential violence. It's a promise, Doctor. Ashford replied. There are congressional committees very interested in individuals with Emma's capabilities. Legal guardianship can be challenged. Circumstances can change. We'll be watching. As the vehicles pulled away, Emma felt the adrenaline drain from her system, leaving her shaky. Tank's large hand settled on her shoulder, grounding her. How did you know to come? Jake asked Sheriff Coleman. The sheriff smiled. Dr. Wells called me yesterday. Said some organization had been asking questions about Emma, wanting access to her medical records. Figured they'd show up soon enough. They'll be back, Emma said quietly. People like that don't give up. Then we'll be ready, Jake said firmly. Sheriff, what are our legal options? They spent the next hour discussing protection strategies, legal frameworks, and contingency plans. Emma found herself both touched by their determination to protect her and terrified by the resources that might be arrayed against them. Later that afternoon, Emma sat with Dr. Wells in the rehabilitation tent, examining a golden retriever with severe anxiety issues. The dog trembled constantly, his trauma from a puppy mill evident in every nervous twitch. "They scared you today," Dr. Wells observed as Emma worked with the dog. "Not just scared," Emma admitted. "They made me think about what I might become in the wrong hands. What if they're right? What if my abilities could be used for important things?" Dr. Wells was quiet for a moment, watching as the golden retriever slowly relaxed under Emma's touch. "I've been a vet for 20 years. You know what I've learned? The most powerful abilities can be used for good or evil. It's not the ability that matters, it's who controls it and why." The dog had stopped trembling, his tail beginning a tentative wag, as Emma found the exact frequency of touch that spoke safety to his traumatized nervous system. "This is important," Dr. Wells continued. "Every animal you heal, every connection you make, every bit of understanding you create between species, it all matters. Don't let anyone convince you that weapons are more valuable than healing." That evening, the Circus family gathered for an emergency meeting. The encounter with Dr. Ashford had shaken everyone, forcing them to confront the reality that Emma's gifts made her a target for forces more powerful than they'd imagined. "We need to be smart about this," Jake said. "They'll use legal channels first, challenge Tank's guardianship, claim we're not providing proper education or medical care. So we get ahead of it," Maria suggested. "Formal documentation, medical records, education plans. Make everything so legitimate they can't find a foothold." "I'll handle the legal side," offered Douglas, the former symphony musician. "Did I mention I have a law degree? Never practiced, but I keep my license current." Emma felt tears prick her eyes as person after person offered their skills, their resources, their protection. The circus that had taken her in was revealing itself as far more than a collection of outcasts. It was a family willing to fight for one of their own. "There's something else," Valentina said quietly. "If they truly consider Emma a national security asset, they won't stop with legal channels. We need to prepare for other possibilities." The meeting continued late into the night, with plans forming for increased security, legal documentation, and escape routes if necessary. But it was Billy who offered the most insightful observation. "They're afraid of her," the boy said suddenly. "That's why they want to control her. They're afraid of what she might become if she's free to choose her own path." Emma considered this as she lay in her trailer that night, listening to the familiar sounds of the circus. The government wanted her abilities, but they wanted them contained, controlled, directed toward their purposes. Here, her gifts were growing in ways no one had anticipated, shaped by love and trust rather than fear and exploitation. Her phone, a recent gift from the Circus family, buzzed with a text from Tank. "You okay?" "Yes," she typed back. "Scared. But okay. We won't let them take you," came the immediate response. Emma smiled in the darkness. She believed him. The gentle giant who had saved her from the auction was now part of an entire community determined to protect her right to choose her own path. But as she drifted towards sleep, her enhanced hearing picked up something that made her blood run cold. In the distance, beyond the normal sounds of the night, she could hear engines. Multiple vehicles, parked but running, positioned at various points around the circus perimeter. Dr. Ashford had said they'd be watching. She hadn't been bluffing. The shadow of danger had fallen across the Morrison family circus, and Emma knew their real fight was just beginning. Whatever came next, she would face it with her chosen family. But first, she needed to warn them about the surveillance she could hear in the darkness. The girl who had once been sold for $75 Dollars was now valuable enough to warrant government attention. The question was whether she could remain free long enough to discover the full extent of her abilities, and whether those abilities might ultimately be the key to her own protection. The surveillance had been constant for 2 weeks. Emma's enhanced hearing tracked the rotating shifts of watchers, their vehicles maintaining a careful distance but never truly leaving. The Circus family had adapted, creating new routines that made it harder for outsiders to monitor their activities. But everyone felt the strain of being under a microscope. It was December now, and the morning frost crunched under Emma's feet as she made her way to the rehabilitation tent. 3 new arrivals had come in during the night, horses rescued from an illegal racing operation. Their trauma was different from the usual abuse cases, layered with drugs and systematic breaking of their natural instincts. They used performance enhancers, Dr. Wells explained as Emma approached the temporary stalls, pushed them past their physical limits, then dumped them when they broke down. The Bay Mare Scarlet, she's the worst. Her nervous system is completely fried. Emma could hear it before she even reached Scarlet's stall. The Mare's heartbeat was erratic, her breathing shallow and panicked. But underneath the chemical damage, Emma sensed something else, a desperate will to survive that hadn't been extinguished despite everything. "Everyone out," Emma said quietly. "Please, I need complete silence for this." Dr. Wells hesitated. "Emma, her chemical imbalances are severe. I'm not sure your usual methods." "Please," Emma repeated, and something in her tone made everyone comply. Alone with the horses, Emma approached Scarlet's stall. The Mare was backed into the corner, her entire body trembling with neurological misfires. Emma had worked with traumatized animals for weeks now, but this was different. This wasn't just emotional trauma, it was systematic biological destruction. Emma placed her hand on the stall door, not entering but simply being present. Then she did something she'd never attempted before. Instead of just listening and connecting, she began to project. Not thoughts or emotions, but something deeper, a frequency of calm that seemed to emanate from her core. The change in Scarlet was immediate. The Mare's head lifted, her unfocused eyes seeking the source of this new sensation. Emma maintained the projection, feeling something flow from her that she couldn't name or fully control. Outside the tent, Tank noticed the surveillance vehicles suddenly converging on their position. "Jake," he called out, "we've got movement." But inside the tent, Emma was oblivious to the external threat. She had entered Scarlet's stall now, her hand making contact with the Mare's neck. The moment of connection was unlike anything she'd experienced before. She could feel the chemical chaos in Scarlet's system, see it almost like a map of neural pathways gone wrong. Without conscious thought, Emma began to influence those pathways. Not healing them, she wasn't capable of that, but creating alternative routes, showing Scarlet's nervous system how to bypass the damaged areas. It was like teaching the Mare's body a new language, one that could work around the destruction. "Impossible." Dr. Wells breathed from the doorway, her medical instruments showing readings that defied explanation. "Her heart rate is stabilizing. Brain activity is reorganizing. This shouldn't be possible." The other 2 horses had moved to the front of their stalls, drawn by whatever Emma was emanating. As she worked with Scarlet, they too began to calm, their own trauma responding to the healing frequency she projected. It was then that the tent flaps burst open. Dr. Ashford entered, flanked by 4 agents in tactical gear. Behind them, Emma could hear the Circus family being held back by more agents, Tank's voice rising in anger. "Extraordinary," Dr. Ashford said, her eyes fixed on the readings from Dr. Wells' equipment. "She's actually rewiring neural pathways. Do you understand what this means?" Emma didn't break contact with Scarlet, couldn't break contact. Something crucial was happening, and interruption could be catastrophic for the Mar. "Stand down, Miss Whitfield," one of the agents commanded. "By order of the Department of Homeland Security, You're to cease all activities and come with us." "She can't stop," Dr. Wells said urgently. "The Mare's system is in flux. If Emma breaks contact now, the backlash could kill the animal." Dr. Ashford studied the situation with cold calculation. "How long?" "I don't know," Dr. Wells admitted. "This is unprecedented." Emma felt the shift happening within Scarlett. Neural pathways settling into new patterns, the Mare system finding a sustainable balance. But something else was happening too. The effort of maintaining this level of connection was draining her in ways she'd never experienced. Her legs trembled, her vision, what little remained from light perception, beginning to gray at the edges. "She's going to collapse," Dr. Wells warned, but Emma held on, driven by determination that came from somewhere deeper than conscious thought. Scarlett needed her. After everything the Mare had endured, Emma wouldn't abandon her now. The moment of completion came suddenly. Scarlett's system stabilized, her breathing deepened, and for the first time in months, the Mare's muscles relaxed. Emma felt the connection ease, her job done. She also felt her knees buckle. Tank burst through the line of agents, catching Emma before she hit the ground. His massive frame easily pushed past the tactical team, who seemed unsure whether to stop him or not. Emma, can you hear me?" She could hear him, but responding took effort. The projection had taken something from her, used reserve she didn't know she had. "Scarlett?" She managed to whisper. "The Mare's fine," Dr. Wells confirmed, her voice thick with emotion. "Better than fine. Her readings are showing neural function I wouldn't have thought possible given the damage." Dr. Ashford stepped forward, her excitement poorly concealed. "This changes everything. She's not just reading biological systems, she's actively influencing them. The applications for human medicine alone." "Back off," Tank growled, cradling Emma protectively. "Can't you see she's exhausted?" "Which is why she needs proper medical attention," Dr. Ashford countered. "Our facility has resources. Our facility has everything she needs." Jake interrupted, having finally pushed past the agents, including people who actually care about her well-being. Sheriff Coleman's voice cut through the tension. "Interesting timing, Dr. Ashford. Federal agents just happening to be here when Emma demonstrates a new ability. Almost like you were waiting for something." Dr. Ashford's expression didn't change. "We maintain protective surveillance on individuals of interest. When our monitors detected unusual energy readings." "Energy readings?" Emma asked weakly, her mind latching onto this revelation. "You can detect what I do?" "To a degree, Doctor," Ashford admitted. "Your abilities generate measurable quantum field fluctuations. We've been refining our detection methods since our last meeting." This information sent a chill through Emma, worse than her physical exhaustion. If they could detect her abilities from a distance, nowhere would be safe. They could track her, study her, wait for the perfect moment to take her. "However," Dr. Ashford continued, "what you just demonstrated exceeds our projections by orders of magnitude. The offer stands, Miss Whitfield. Come with us willingly, and we can help you understand and develop these gifts properly." "My answer hasn't changed," Emma said, finding strength in her conviction. "I belong here." Dr. Ashford studied her for a long moment. "Very well, but you should know that certain congressional committees are very interested in your case. Legal proceedings have already begun to challenge your current guardianship arrangement." She turned to leave, then paused. "You saved that Mare today. Imagine how many human lives you could save with proper resources and training. Think about that when you're choosing between a circus and a chance to change the world." After the agents left, the circus family gathered in the main tent. Emma sat wrapped in blankets, sipping the tea Mama Rose had prepared, while the others discussed what had happened. "She's escalating," Douglas said, his legal mind analyzing the situation. "The demonstration of Emma's enhanced abilities gives them ammunition. They'll argue she needs specialized care we can't provide. Can they win? Maria asked. Douglas hesitated. Possibly. Tank's guardianship is informal. If they can prove Emma's abilities pose a risk without proper supervision, then we make it formal, Tank said firmly. Legal adoption, whatever it takes. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. The giant man who had saved her was willing to become her legal father to protect her. Tank, you don't have to. Yes, I do, he interrupted gently. You're family now. We protect family. Valentina, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. There is another way. In my country, we had saying, the best defense is not to be where attack comes. You're suggesting we run? Jake asked. I'm suggesting we become harder to find, Valentina clarified. Circus is mobile by nature. Why stay in one place like sitting ducks? The idea sparked immediate discussion. The Morrison family circus hadn't toured in years, but the infrastructure was still there. The vehicles, the permits, the connections with other small circuses across the country. It could work, Jake said slowly. We go back on the road, keep moving. Harder to serve legal papers if they can't find us. But the animals, Sarah protested. The rehabilitation program comes with us, Emma said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. Mobile. Veterinary rehabilitation. We help animals wherever we go. Build a network of supporters across the country. Make it harder for them to paint us as irresponsible. Dr. Wells nodded thoughtfully. I have colleagues in various states who'd support this. Mobile specialty veterinary care is actually a growing field. Plans began forming rapidly. They would finish the current rehabilitation cases, then begin a tour that would take them across California, into Nevada, Arizona, and beyond. Each stop would include performances but also animal rehabilitation clinics, building goodwill and legal protection through community support. There's one more thing, Emma said quietly. What I did today with Scarlett, I don't fully understand it, but I felt something change in me, like a door opening to abilities I didn't know I had. All the more reason to keep you safe well. You figure it out, Tank said firmly. That night, Emma lay in her trailer listening to the sounds of preparation. The circus was transforming around her, returning to its nomadic roots. Equipment was being serviced, routes planned, connections renewed, but her enhanced hearing also picked up the surveillance teams adjusting their positions, preparing for the circus's new mobility. Dr. Ashford wasn't giving up. If anything, Emma's demonstration had intensified their interest. As she drifted toward sleep, Emma's mind replayed the moment of connection with Scarlett. She had touched something profound, the ability not just to understand biological systems, but to influence them. It was a power that could indeed change the world, as Dr. Ashford had said, but it was also a power that needed to be developed with wisdom, not exploited for purposes she didn't choose. The circus offered her that chance, to grow at her own pace, to use her abilities for healing rather than other applications she could imagine the government wanting. The revelation of her true power had changed everything. Now the question was whether she could stay free long enough to understand what she was becoming, and whether the family that had chosen to protect her could stand against the forces that wanted to control her gifts. Tomorrow, they would begin their journey into uncertainty. But tonight, surrounded by the sounds of her circus family preparing to fight for her freedom in their own unique way, Emma felt something she hadn't experienced since before her parents' accident: hope for a future she could choose for herself. The gentle giant's promise echoed in her mind: you'll never perform again. But Tank had been wrong about one thing. She would perform, not as a spectacle for others' entertainment, but as a healer, using her gifts freely and willingly to help those who needed it most. The revelation of her power was really the revelation of her purpose, and no government agency, no matter how powerful, would take that from her without a fight. The Morrison family circus had been on the road for 3 weeks when Emma first sensed they were being hunted by something more dangerous than government agents. It was a cold January morning in Flagstaff, Arizona, and the circus had set up in a fairground on the outskirts of town. Emma woke before dawn with every nerve screaming danger. "Tank," she whispered urgently into the phone he'd insisted she keep beside her bed. "Something's wrong. The surveillance teams are gone, but there's someone else. Multiple someone else's." Within minutes, Tank was at her trailer, his massive frame tense with readiness. The rest of the security team, a mix of performers who'd taken on protective duties, spread out across the grounds. "What do you hear?" Tank asked quietly. Emma tilted her head, sorting through the layers of sound. 5 vehicles. Approaching from different directions. Their engines are modified, quieter than normal, and ... double quote. She paused, concentrating. "Heartbeats. Elevated but controlled. These aren't government agents. These are professionals. Mercenaries, maybe." "Jake's voice crackled over the radio. "Confirm visual on approaching vehicles. Tank, get Emma to the safe room." They'd built the hidden compartment into one of the equipment trailers after leaving California, a precaution that now seemed prescient. But as Tank guided Emma toward it, she suddenly stopped. "The animals," she gasped. "They're after the animals." 2. I can hear tranquilizer guns being loaded. The revelation changed everything. This wasn't just about capturing Emma. Someone wanted to take the rehabilitated animals as well, probably to study what her influence had done to them. "Change of plans," Tank announced into his radio. "They're here for the animals too. All hands defensive positions." What followed was a chase unlike anything the circus had experienced. As the mercenaries moved in, the circus family executed plans they drilled but hoped never to use. Vehicles roared to life, creating a mobile shield around the animal trailers. Performers used their unique skills, acrobats creating distractions, strongmen blocking access points, illusionists using smoke and mirrors to confuse the attackers. Emma found herself in the cab of the main animal transport, Dr. Wells at the wheel, as they careened through the pre-dawn darkness. Her enhanced hearing tracked the pursuit, calling out warnings that allowed Dr. Wells to avoid roadblocks and ambush points. "Left at the next intersection," Emma shouted. 2 vehicles waiting on the right. The circus convoy split and reformed like a living organism, each vehicle knowing its role in protecting the core group. Maria's voice came over the radio, calm. "Despite the chaos, Route 89 is clear heading north. Rendezvous at Point Charlie." Point Charlie was one of several predetermined safe locations they'd scouted, an abandoned drive-in theater 20 miles north where they could regroup and assess. But the mercenaries were well-equipped and persistent. Emma could hear radio chatter suggesting they had aerial support coming, a helicopter that would make escape impossible. "We need to go to ground," Emma said urgently. "There's a helicopter inbound, ETA 5 minutes. Tank's voice was grim over the radio. "Options?" Emma closed her eyes, extending her awareness to the animals in the trailer. Scarlet was calm despite the chase, her rebuilt neural pathways holding steady. The dogs were anxious but trusting. And then she felt something else, a pull toward the east, as if the land itself was calling. "East," she said with sudden certainty, "through the national forest. There's something there, a place will be safe." It was a risk, trusting her. Instincts over logic, but Jake made the call. "All vehicles hard east at the next opportunity. Follow Emma's lead." They plunged into the Coconino National Forest as the first rays of sunrise painted the sky. The roads became trails, then barely visible paths. Emma guided them with supernatural precision, sensing safe passages through terrain that should have been impassable for their vehicles behind them. The mercenaries struggled with the rough terrain. Their sophisticated equipment was less suited to off-road pursuit than the circus's weathered trucks and trailers. The helicopters turning back. Emma reported with relief. Trees are too dense for them to track us. They drove for another hour, deeper into the forest than any map showed roads. Finally, Emma called a halt in a natural clearing surrounded by towering pines and protective rock formations. "Here," she said with certainty she couldn't explain. "We're safe here." As the circus family emerged from their vehicles, everyone felt it. A sense of peace and protection that seemed to emanate from the land itself. The animals, when released for exercise, showed none of their usual anxiety in a new place. Even Scarlett, still recovering from her neural rewiring, walked calmly from her trailer as if returning home. "How did you know about this place?" Dr. Wells asked Emma. "I didn't," Emma admitted. "But something did. It's like the land recognized us, recognized what we're trying to do." Valentina, wise in folklore from her homeland, nodded knowingly. Some places have their own power. They choose who to protect. They spent 3 days in the forest clearing, the natural barriers and some kind of interference that affected electronic equipment, keeping them hidden from their pursuers. During this time, Emma's connection to the rescued animals deepened even further. She could sense their healing accelerating, their trust in humans rebuilding faster than normal rehabilitation would allow. More significantly, she began to understand that her abilities weren't limited to animals. The forest itself seemed to communicate with her, not in words or even emotions, but in deep pulses of awareness that told her when danger was near or when it was safe to move. On the third night, Tank found Emma sitting by the small fire they'd built, tears streaming down her face. "What's wrong?" he asked gently, settling his large frame beside her. "I can feel them," she whispered. "All of them. Every creature in this forest, from the largest elk to the smallest insect. They're all connected, all part of something bigger. And somehow, I'm part of it too." Tank was quiet for a moment. "Is it painful?" "No," Emma said, wiping her tears. "It's beautiful, but it's also terrifying. If I can feel this much, connect this deeply, what else might be possible? What am I becoming, Tank?" "You're becoming yourself," he said simply. "The self you were always meant to be. And whatever that ends up being, we'll face it together." The next morning, Emma woke knowing it was time to move. The forest had sheltered them, but staying would put the ecosystem at risk if their pursuers used more aggressive methods to flush them out. "North," she announced at the morning meeting. "There's a network of small towns, family-run sanctuaries. I can feel them, people like us who'll help." Jake studied the maps. "That's almost completely off-grid territory. It'll be hard for anyone to track us there." "That's the point," Emma said. "We can't just run forever. We need to build something bigger, a network of people who understand that what we're doing matters, not just for the animals, but for something larger." As they prepared to leave their forest sanctuary, each member of the circus family felt the shift. They were no longer just running from those who wanted to exploit Emma's abilities. They were moving towards something, a purpose, that went beyond mere survival. The chase would continue. Dr. Ashford's resources were vast, and now private interests were involved as well. But Emma's abilities were revealing something that their pursuers couldn't understand from their sterile laboratories and government facilities, the interconnectedness of all living things, and the power that came from honoring rather than exploiting that connection. As the convoy pulled out of the clearing, Emma felt the forest's farewell like a gentle embrace. She'd found more than a hiding place in those ancient trees. She'd found a glimpse of her true purpose. The little blind girl who'd been auctioned for $75 was becoming something unprecedented, a bridge between humanity and the natural world. And no amount of pursuit could stop that transformation. The chase had begun in earnest, but so had Emma's evolution into something the world had never seen before. 6 months had passed since the forest chase, and the Morrison family circus had become something unprecedented, a traveling sanctuary that left healing in its wake. Emma, now 17, stood in the center of a packed amphitheater in Portland, Oregon, though she wasn't performing in any traditional sense. Around her, arranged in a careful circle, were 27 animals, each one a graduate of her rehabilitation program. Horses that had been deemed untrainable stood calmly beside dogs rescued from fighting rings. A golden eagle with a permanently damaged wing perched peacefully near cats that had been feral for years. The audience of 3,000 watched in silent awe as Emma moved among them, her blindness seeming irrelevant as she navigated with supernatural grace. "What you're witnessing," Jake announced from his position as narrator, "isn't a trick or trained behavior. These animals have chosen to be here to demonstrate the healing that's possible when we approach other species with respect and understanding rather than dominance." In the wings, Tank watched with fierce pride, his protective instincts never fully relaxing even after months of relative safety. Their network had grown beyond anything they'd imagined. Veterinarians, animal sanctuaries, and even some government officials who believed in their mission had created a protective web around the circus, but Emma could sense something in the air tonight, a tension that made her enhanced abilities hum with warning. As she worked with the animals, demonstrating the communication techniques that had evolved far beyond her initial gift, she heard it, vehicles surrounding the amphitheater, heartbeats elevated with military precision, and one familiar voice. Coordinating the operation. Dr. Ashford had found them. Emma didn't break her concentration or alert the audience. Instead, she did something she'd been developing over the months of growth. She reached out with her consciousness, touching the awareness of every animal in the building, including the many pets in the audience. The message she sent was simple: be ready. Protect the innocent. As the demonstration concluded to thunderous applause, Emma made her way backstage where Tank was already coordinating with their security team. Sheriff Coleman had sent word. Federal marshals were taking positions at every exit, and this time they had judges' orders that even their network of supporters couldn't challenge. "They've charged me with endangering a minor and operating an unlicensed medical facility," Jake said grimly, reading from his phone. "They're claiming Emma's abilities make her a ward of the state for her own protection." "How long do we have?" Tank asked. "They're waiting until the audience clears," Maria reported from her lookout position. "They don't want witnesses to what happens next." Emma felt a strange calm descend over her. For months, she'd been running, hiding, trying to stay ahead of those who wanted to control her gifts. But her time in the forest had taught her something crucial. Sometimes the greatest strength came from standing still and facing what pursued you. "No more running," she said quietly, but her voice carried absolute conviction. "It's not just about me anymore. It's about proving that what we're doing matters more than their need to control it." "Emma, they have legal documents this time," Douglas warned. "I've reviewed everything. Their case is solid. If they take you, then we make sure the world watches," Emma interrupted. "Jake, is the live stream still running?" Jake checked his equipment. 5,000 viewers and climbing. Social media is already lighting up about the demonstration. Emma nodded. "Good, because what happens next needs to be witnessed." She walked back onto the stage, surprising everyone. The audience had been filing out, but stopped when they saw her return. The animals, still in their circle, turned toward her with obvious recognition. "Ladies and gentlemen," Emma said, her young voice carrying surprising authority, "I need to share something with you. In a few minutes, federal agents are going to enter this building to take me into custody. They believe my abilities to communicate with animals make me dangerous, without government supervision. They think what we've built here, this network of healing and understanding, threatens their need to control everything they don't understand." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some people pulled out phones, starting their own recordings. "But I want you to see something first," Emma continued. "I want you to understand what they're really trying to stop." She moved to the center of the animal circle and did something she'd never done publicly before. She opened her consciousness fully, dropping all barriers between herself and the life around her. The effect was immediate and visible. Every animal in the circle lay down simultaneously, creating a mandala pattern around her. Their eyes remained open, alert, but their bodies showed complete tranquility. More remarkably, pets throughout the audience began responding. Dogs stopped barking. Cats ceased their restless movements. Even the service animals showed signs of deep peace. "This is what they fear," Emma said, her voice carrying across the hushed amphitheater. "Not the ability itself, but what it represents. The possibility that humans can connect with other species as equals, not masters. The understanding that consciousness isn't limited to human minds, that intelligence takes forms we're only beginning to recognize." The main doors burst open. Federal agents in tactical gear stormed in, led by Dr. Ashford herself. But they stopped short at the sight before them, 3,000 people on their feet, phones raised, documenting everything. And in the center of it all, a blind teenage girl surrounded by a perfect circle of completely calm animals. "Emma Whitfield," Dr. Ashford announced, her voice amplified by a megaphone. "By order of the United States District Court, you are to come with us immediately." Emma didn't move. "I will not perform for you," she said, her words carrying to every corner of the amphitheater. "I will not let you turn my gift into a weapon or a tool for control. What I can do belongs to all life, not to any government or organization." "You don't have a choice," Dr. Ashford responded, motioning her agents forward. But as the tactical team advanced, something unprecedented happened. The animals rose as one, not aggressively, but with undeniable purpose. They formed a living barrier between Emma and the agents, joined moments later by pets from the audience. Dogs, cats, even a few birds that had been carried, and created a protective wall. "This is what connection looks like," Emma announced to the cameras. "Not control, but choice. These animals choose to protect me because I've chosen to heal them. This is what your government wants to cage, the possibility of genuine interspecies cooperation." The agents hesitated, faced with a situation their training hadn't covered. They couldn't use force against dozens of animals without creating a public relations nightmare being streamed live to millions. It was Tank who stepped forward then, placing himself at the front of the animal barrier. "You want Emma? You go through us first." One by one, the Circus family joined him. Jake, Maria, Billy, Valentina, Marcus, Mama Rose, and all the others. Then, incredibly, audience members began stepping forward too. Dozens, then hundreds of people formed human chains, linking arms, creating layer after layer of peaceful resistance. "This is illegal interference with federal agents," Dr. Ashford warned. "No," said a familiar voice from the back of the amphitheater. "This is democracy in action." Governor Patricia Hartley of Oregon walked down the center aisle, flanked by state police and her own security detail. Behind her came Senator James Crawford, Representative Maria Santos, and what looked like half the state legislature. "Governor Hartley," Dr. Ashford said carefully, "this is a federal matter, taking place in my state, affecting one of my constituents," the governor replied. She'd been following Emma's story for months, her own daughter having benefited from the circus's animal therapy program. "I've just signed an emergency executive order granting Emma Whitfield protected status under Oregon's medical innovation statutes. Any attempt to remove her from this state will be met with full legal resistance." "You can't override federal authority," Dr. Ashford protested. "I can when federal authority oversteps its bounds," Governor Hartley responded. "And I'm not alone. 17 other governors have signed similar orders. 43 senators have demanded congressional hearings into your agency's overreach. And right now, approximately 6 million people are watching this live stream." Emma felt tears streaming down her face as she understood what was happening. The network they'd built, the lives they'd touched, the healing they'd spread, it had all led to this moment. They were no longer alone against government forces. They had awakened something in the public consciousness. Furthermore, Senator Crawford added, stepping forward, I'm announcing the introduction of the Whitfield Act, legislation that will protect individuals with emerging abilities from exploitation, while ensuring they can develop their gifts for the benefit of all. Emma's story has shown us that the future of human potential doesn't belong in locked laboratories. It belongs in the open, where it can grow naturally. Dr. Ashford stood frozen, her carefully laid plans crumbling in the face of massive public resistance. Her earpiece crackled with orders from superiors who were watching their covert program explode into public view. Stand down, she finally ordered her agents. All units, stand down. The amphitheater erupted in celebration. Emma felt herself pulled into embrace after embrace. Tank's protective hug, Billy's excited jumping, Mama Rose's tearful joy. Animals, sensing the shift in energy, began their own celebrations, horses whinnying, dogs barking joyfully, even the golden eagle spreading its one good wing in triumph. But it was the quiet moment afterward that Emma would remember most. As the crowds dispersed and the media frenzy began, she found herself sitting with Tank in the empty amphitheater. You did it, he said simply. You're free. We did it, Emma corrected. All of us. The circus, the animals, everyone who believed that different doesn't mean less valuable. So what now? Tank asked, the world's watching. You could go anywhere. Do anything. Emma smiled, her unseeing eyes somehow radiant with purpose. Now we do what we've always done, help animals heal, teach people to connect, and show the world that the greatest performances aren't about entertainment. They're about transformation. And the circus? Tank asked. The circus continues, Emma said firmly, but bigger. Not just one traveling show, but a network of healing centers, teaching programs, research facilities that respect rather than exploit. We've proven that my abilities aren't unique. They're just more developed. Others can learn, can connect, can heal. As they sat in the quiet amphitheater, Emma's enhanced senses picked up something that made her smile. Throughout the city, throughout the state, throughout the country, animals and humans were responding to what they'd witnessed. Connections were forming, understanding was growing, and the barriers between species were beginning to dissolve. Gentle Giant, who had saved her from the auction, had promised she'd never perform again. He'd been both wrong and right. She would never perform as a spectacle for others' amusement. But she would perform the greatest feat imaginable, teaching humanity to hear the voices they'd forgotten how to hear, to reconnect with the web of life that sustained them all. Emma Whitfield, the blind girl who'd been auctioned for $75, had become something unprecedented, not a weapon or a tool, but a bridge between worlds. And as she stood to leave the amphitheater, guided by Tank's protective presence, she knew this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. The real work of healing, teaching, and transforming humanity's relationship with all life was just starting. But now she wouldn't do it from the shadows, running from those who feared her gifts. She would do it in the light, supported by millions who understood that the future of human evolution lay not in domination, but in connection. The circus that had saved her would now help save something much larger, the possibility of a world where every being's consciousness was recognized, respected, and valued. The greatest show on earth had become something far more powerful, a revolution in consciousness itself. And at its center stood a young woman who had learned that the most profound performances happened not on stage but in the quiet moments of connection between all living things. As they walked into their new future, Emma heard the world singing, every creature adding its voice to a symphony of possibility that no government could silence, no authority could cage. She had found her purpose, her family, and her freedom, and this time no one would take it away. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.